Hello, I'm Lisa Meter, and today is August 15th, 2021. I want to answer the question, what is the history of the Alhambra, and what are the Lindaraja Mirador and the Lion's Palace inside the Alhambra? I became interested in the Alhambra when we studied its gardens in my landscape design history class. The Alhambra looked to me like it came straight out of the book, The Arabian Nights. According to Robert Irwin in the book The Alhambra is the only Muslim palace to survive from the Middle Ages. The history of medieval Spain is a struggle for supremacy in the Iberian Peninsula between Muslims and Christians. Alhambra was the residence and the seat of the government for the Nasrids until 1492. It was begun in the 9th century as a fort, and it was the 13th and 14th century additions made by the Nasrid dynasty that made it famous. Many who have toured the Alhambra think the buildings are the most beautiful in the world. It is situated on a spur of the Sierra Nevada in Granada, Spain, and was the last Islamic holdout in Spain until it was conquered by the Christians in 1492. At one time, the Alhambra walls contained as many as 6 palaces, a barracks, a congregational mosque, a small town, a zoo, industrial workshops, and an aviary. The whole complex is about 35 acres and is surrounded by a wall. There are many extraordinary things to tell you about Alhambra as it was in Moorish Spain, but today I only have time to mention a couple. In the article, The Eye of Serenity, Poetry and Vision in Alhambra's Lindaraja Mirador, D. Fairchild Ruggles tells us about a very special room at the Alhambra, where the Nasrid Sultan could view his kingdom and be inspired by the poetry inscribed on the walls. Lindaraja means the eye of the house of Aisha, and Mirador means viewpoint. Though the Alhambra Palace in 14th century Granada had an extraordinary number of windows, towers, and balconies that allowed one to gaze at the city and landscape beyond the palace walls, the room was built especially for the Sultan's views. The room is a box with strategically placed single windows on each side and double-framed mullion windows above them. A ceiling of stained glass windows reflected jewel-like radiance into the graceful chamber, with the bottom of the wall decorated with colorful tiles and ornately carved plasterwork. The windows are meant as frames to frame the viewer's view, connecting the outside with the inside. The Mirador had a panoramic view of the exterior landscape. From the unexpected moment of an interior closed space and the dramatic view of the mountains, it was as if the palace extended itself by means of the active sight into Granada and the Nasrid kingdom. The view went across the beautiful Islamic gardens, connecting the Court of Lions, which was the heart of the Lion's Palace where the Sultan lived, with Granada and the mountains in one visual trajectory. Thus, everything about this room was strategic. Where it was built in the complex, where the windows were placed, and what the Sultan would see looking out of these frames. Also important for the Sultan to contemplate was the poetry inscribed around the windows and on the walls in this room. They drew attention to the view and defined the position of the viewer. One poem around a window positioning the Sultan with respect to his kingdom begins, "In this garden I am an eye filled with delight, and the pupil of this eye is truly our Lord Muhammad, praiseworthy for his bravery and generosity, with fame outstanding and virtue graceful. He is the full moon on the empire's horizon. His signs are lasting and his light brilliant." The last thing I want to tell you about is the Lion's Palace, also known as Kamari's Palace. According to Robert Irwin in the book The Alhambra, the Lion's Palace was built between 1370 and 1390 by Muhammad V. There is a possibility that the Lion's Palace was a private palace reserved for the Sultan and his harem. According to Irwin, the delicacy and elegance of the ornamental architecture is breathtaking, and even more so in the moonlight. There are 2 courtyards in the Lion's Palace, the Court of Lions and the Court of Myrtles. The Court of Lions fountain is in the center of the palace. A large basin is surrounded by 12 statues of lions with water spouts. At one time, these lions told you the time of day. There are 4 water channels that run from the fountain. I learned in my landscape design history class that these represent the 4 rivers flowing out of the Garden of Eden to the north, south, east, and west. In the 14th century, the stone, wood, and stucco in the Court of Lions were vibrantly painted blue and gold. Other brilliant colors were displayed in carpets and silk wall hangings around the courtyard. There was a sunken garden filled with orange trees and flowers, sunken so it did not impede the view to the lions. My question was, what is the history of the Alhambra? And what are the Lindaraja Mirador and the Lions Palace inside the Alhambra? The Alhambra is the only Muslim palace to survive from the Middle Ages. Situated on a spur of the Sierra Nevada in Granada, Spain, many who have toured the Alhambra think that they are the most beautiful palaces in the world. There is a very special room in the Alhambra called the Lindaraja Mirador, where the Nasrid Sultan could view his kingdom and be inspired by the poetry inscribed on the walls and around the windows. The windows were frames connecting the outside with the inside. The Lions Palace was built between 1370 and 1390 by Muhammad V. At its heart is the Court of Lions, likely the best-known feature of the Alhambra.